the convenient place to start, surprise, is graphene, because it's very, very simple material. It's only carbon atom, two-dimensional plane, so nothing can be simpler than that. Though, of course, so all the mathematicians know that the honeycomb lattice is not one of the Bravais lattices, so that's where the interesting story starts. So the unit cell of the honeycomb lattice consists of two atoms. So here I colored them green and red, though we all know that carbon atoms are blue. But then if you allow now quantum mechanically for those electrons to sit simultaneously on red and green atoms, you get the bonding and anti-bonding states, and from that those Dirac points stem. And I'm not going to go too much into detail, so you all know about the topological charges which are associated with that. But just maybe for those who are outside of physics, or just demonstrate to show you a couple of really quite counterintuitive experiments which really come out of this unusual situation which we never had before in condensed matter. And say, for example, there is the effects which you can see there are such effects as Planck tunneling, the relativistic tunneling. So from your everyday experience, you know that if you run a car into a wall, you would crush it. In quantum mechanics, there is tiny, very fine but finite probability that you can go through the wall if the object is coherent, is quantum. That's the phenomenon called tunneling. The probability is pretty much zero if you do it with your car, so don't try it. Even with the rented car, don't try it at home. But it's actually a major event in modern transistors, for example. So the tunneling current is a huge problem in modern electronics. But it's still a very small probability. So for electrons in graphene, for relativistic electrons, Planck tunneling guarantees that it's 100% probability to go through a barrier, and we actually see it experimentally. So another, and that actually gives us the very high mobilities. Mobility is the measure how fast electrons travel in material. For silicon transistors in your integrated circuits, it's about 1,000. For Hammond transistors for the high frequency electronics, it's about 50,000-70,000. For graphene, we usually go to 1 million, even at room temperature. Then what always really fascinates me, that even optical properties of graphene are quite unusual. So you would say, what kind of optical properties can you get? It's just one thick material. Apparently you can actually see it with your naked eye, and the contrast which you see, so there is nothing here, graphene, 2 layers of graphene, so this contrast is exactly, it's 2.3%, but it's not given by any material parameters, it's a combination of the fundamental constants, so it's another way to calculate pi. So we just look through graphene, divided by the fine structure constants, so and then you get pi. So and all those properties, they actually triggered some interest for the applications of graphene in many different areas, from energy to electronics, composites, catalysis, whatever. And well, before going into the future, what you can expect from graphene, let me just tell you a few stories what graphene has done for us already. And so, of course, it created workplaces, because many of my PhD students, they opened those companies, and some even became rich. Now, it was not as a joke until a few years ago I received my regular copy of the Glamour magazine, and then on one of the pages you read 5 jobs our kids will be doing, and then they are right next to virtual architect, avatar stylist, technical account developer, there is graphene engineer. So, because if said by who am I to argue with glamour? So it gives entertainment as well. So I hope these you still remember that old sitcom, now all about the postdocs in Caltech, and the main guy is Sheldon's, and in one of the episodes he was trying to solve the question why electrons in graphene behave as massless quasi-particles, and he spends the whole episode long, and it's not surprising because some of the formulas there are actually wrong. So that's it's for the biolab, not for the mono. And then it also gives shelter if you fancy living in Tallahassee, Florida, you can go and live on the graphene. But in reality, quite interestingly, so we believe in the laws of physics. So dealing with this, I started to believe in the laws of economics as well, because so it's followed exactly the footsteps of all the other advanced materials before it. Carbon fibers, carbon nanotubes, they all start their way into applications from the composites material, usually the sport goods, where you can pay premium for the improvement, for the small improvement of the properties. Ourselves, we will work with Richard Miller and McLaren to create this world lightest, unfortunately, world most expensive watch as well. So it's 1 million Swiss franc for 32 grams. Definitely by far most expensive for per gram. And if you haven't got 1 million Swiss, we also work on this car. It's on the quarter of £1,000,000, but it's a real car, roadworthy, and all of those cars now use graphene panels not because of the strength or the lightweight, but because of the thermal conductivity, and it just makes the production much faster. And then, so these days, you just basically every single Ford car would have graphene panels under the bonnet. So for noise cancelling, you can actually do noise creation. So you take these headphones where you have where you need very linear characteristics. So for that you need very stiff but very light material. That's all graphene. So thermal management, thermal conductivity of 1,000 watts meter Kelvin, and so on. Probably the most interesting and actually most widely used is the use of graphene for resistance standard. So these days, 2 years ago, we changed the way how we define the fundamental constants. We actually define them now. We don't measure, but for that we need to measure the resistance very precisely. We would usually do it through the quantum Hall effect. So you need to put two-dimensional conductor into high magnetic field, very low temperature. You do it. In graphene, you don't need high field, really very modest field and very modest temperatures as well. And then telecommunications and so on. So now, for some time, there was a question of this: can we produce enough graphene? Because we started long time ago with the mechanical exploration. We simply take graphite, which is the material in your lead pencils, and then you exfoliate it with the Scotch tape, which is of course not scalable. But these days, depending on the price you want to pay and the quality you want to achieve, you can actually produce huge quantities of graphene, either by mass or by area. Probably the most popular one is for the electronic grade of graphene is the chemical vapor deposition, and it's you will run carbon-containing gas on top of the surface of a hot metal. Due to catalytic properties of the metal, you crack this gas, and carbon rearranges itself on the surface. And the beauty here is that you basically can use any carbon-containing species. For example, some time ago we needed iron-doped graphene. So what do? You just use this. You prick your finger, put the blood onto copper, stick it into the furnace. That's it. You get iron-doped graphene. And for the students, don't worry. So those students were harmed. Those are my fingers, But then it actually has some interesting consequences, because I guess many of you have seen those flares above the refinery plants, and it's basically those flares which have both the heat which we need and the carbon-containing gas. So we basically, together with my former student in China, we made this machine which it's a reactor which turns those flares into graphene or carbon nanotubes. So it depends on the regime, and it's really, you basically get a negative price for this, and we even link it to the blockchain as well. So it works quite well. So there are many other ways how to produce graphene depending on the application. So we don't really. So it's all more or less sorted, and then there are more and more of those applications appear. But now the development of this was that people asked all our students, they are of course very active, and they want to do more and more and more, but then there were always lots of questions. Why were we always asking me, why we only work with the lead pencils? Don't we have enough money to buy the colored pencils as well? So in principle, so after we had some investment from the government, so we could afford to buy the colored pencils. And in principle, it just gives you the opportunity to create other two-dimensional crystals, not only graphene. And these days we are talking about not only carbon-based two-dimensional material, but also a huge variety of other crystals. And they basically cover a huge space of properties, from the most insulating to semiconducting to metallic, we have superconductors, ferromagnets, you name it. So we are talking about the family of the two-dimensional crystals. And first of all, it's an exciting area, because physics in 2 dimensions is of course different from that in 3 dimensions. So your phase transitions become different, so you have topological state and so on. So that's so it's interesting by itself. But there is another level of this, because now we can produce those in large quantities. We have monolayers. When we come to a lab, we have monolayers of those crystals available to us. Now we can ask ourselves a question: okay, all those monolayers, can I actually put them together back and produce an artificial 3-dimensional crystal back? And the answer is yes, we can. And now we can combine materials which we couldn't combine before. We do it with the atomic precision. We control the sequence, the relative angle, which becomes very important in principle. And already quite a number of those new devices, new materials have been created and studied. Just maybe to give you one example, so this is quite a complex stack, so we literally have to do it by hand, just putting one layer after another over hands. But it works miracle. So this is the light device. So you apply voltage, you inject the reference pairs into those quantum wells, and it starts to emit light. So graphene plays on the secondary role here, just for those 2 monolayers on top and the bottom. So the quantum wells are the semiconducting monolayers. So, and because there are so many of those crystals available to us, we can actually tune the properties of those crystals for specific applications, for specific wavelengths, for example. And it basically opens a new direction in material science, which is called the tailored materials or materials on demand. So we can program we can just think about the properties which we need, so the valence we need or the characteristics of the transistor, and then we can build material which gives us those properties. So rather than being stuck with the material which is given to us by nature, we can produce those materials for with the specific properties. So just to conclude this part, so graphene is more or less in the applications in the production. So the other two crystals and those one-level structures, the artificial three-dimensional materials, they are extremely actively researched also in this university as well. So there are fantastic work being done, and so it's really quite exciting area. But now I want to ask you to think a little bit further and ask yourself how do you think the area of material science should develop, and what do we want actually from material science? And for that, just to explain what I mean and what kind of challenges we can expect, let me just show you a couple of clips here. So I hope some of you do remember. So for younger people in the audience, I probably need to explain. This is just a few shots from the famous movie, the Terminator 2 movie. It's a movie, so the plot is that the robot from the future was sent back to 1991 to kill Sarah Connor and her son. So the movie was shot in 91, and this robot was coming from 2029. The reason why I'm showing it to you is just to show you how people back 30 years ago were thinking how our robots in the future would be. So they would be made of liquid metal, agile, self-healing, self-repair, changing shape, and so on. So we're now in 2022, and I've got a bad news for you, that unless we actually change the technology completely, we will never get to here. And it doesn't matter how much money we pay, we just put into the programming or improving the properties of those robots. It's not going to converge. So it's just fundamentally impossible. And the reason for that is that so our technology is essentially, our functionality is essentially top down, and what it means basically that our technologies have to be functional on the very top level. Individual components are never functional, so the functionality comes only when we assemble it together into a clock, into a robot, or it's the same problem with the electronics, it's the same problem with the energy components, and so on. Now, if you think about biological systems, they actually work on a completely different principle, and there the complexity is actually spread across all the levels, and the functionality is spread across all the levels. So the individual proteins, they are functional, the membranes, so the individual cells, organs. So if you can take a membrane of a cell, and it would perform certain functions on its own. So the question is, can we actually somehow design our system so to spread this functionality on many different levels? So then we will have much more agile systems which we can ask to do much more complex things. And so that's what we're trying to do. We call it the functional intelligent material. Functional means that we can program those materials to perform a certain function, which is reasonably easy. It's not that difficult. But then intelligent will mean that the very least of intelligence, we want them to have some memory functions inside, so they can remember its prehistory and basically learn from the prehistory. Just let me give you one example. So imagine you have, so graphene is being used for water desalination. So it works quite well. So you put in Singapore, they don't use graphene membranes, but the membrane technology is the dominant technology to produce fresh water. So you just pump water through and you get seawater through and you get fresh water. But actually, in the water supply chain, you need much more. You need to make sure that it's safe, there are no toxic impurities. So for that, you do what? You put a sensor into the water stream. The sensor monitors the quality. It sends the signal to the computer. If something goes wrong, computer analyzes it, sends a signal to the actuator, which closes the valve, and so on. Now imagine that we have the material which has all those functions in itself. So for example, we play with polyelectrolytes, which can be tuned to react on certain chemical species, change their conformation, close the pores, for example. So you basically have material which works as a sensor, as the controller, and as the actuator at the same time. So so that would be our dream. The problem is that we essentially, if you want to have those materials to have memory, it means that it's necessarily means that they need to be out of equilibrium. So we need to create them in the metastable states, and that's what physicists do quite badly. We don't have many tools to describe those metastable states. We have tricks, but no realistic tools, and that's what we are trying to develop now, how to describe the metastable dissipative states and dissipative behavior of those systems. So I mean, it's not particularly new. We sort of knew it from for quite a long time. We can just send those ideas back to Schrödinger, and so we basically need some composite material where we have strong interaction between the components, but this interaction also needs to be on different levels. So those components need to interact, Coulomb, elastic, van der Waals, chemical bonds, hydrogen, whatever, and then you can create a glassy state full of metastable states, which generate states like spin glass if you want, and then you can learn this landscape and then navigate your system through this landscape. So that's actually exactly how protein works. So why proteins are so versatile? It's because they have a number of closely spaced metastable states in their folding. So and then when this or another function needs to be done, they fold, unfold, just change the conformation, do something, then fold back, basically going through all those local energy. So, but the question is how to learn all this and how to create material with the specific functions. So we do this by just combining many low-dimensional structures into composite materials, and we play with different interactions, and we basically program them to react in a certain way to a given stimuli, but also to create what we need to create a certain response and feedback to change the internal structure. So we have the memory function as well. And as I said, unfortunately, we don't have many ways how to do it in physics. So we are quite bad in describing metastable states. So we use quite a lot of machine learning and material robotics these days to do it. And maybe just give you a couple of examples of this kind of work. So here is the polymer chain folding, and so what we do, we try to create sort of local thermodynamics for those polymer chains, so how they can fold and unfold, and by monitoring the behavior of them in real time, we can learn about the potential which governs this. It's through the sorry, I should say that this is not my it's the mainly work from Li Qiao, who is the mathematician in Singapore, and so by learning this through neural networks, we basically can predict the statistical behavior of those polymer chains. So the black is the experimental, and red is the prediction depending on the starting point. But the starting point is also not the atomic positions, but it's some macroscopic variables. So how it can be relevant in real life application? So here is the experimental example of this. This is the self-healing material, which is based on high entropy alloys. So what you basically do, you create high entropy alloys, which consist of many atoms of different species, and you store a lot of energy in the entropy part, and then under certain conditions you can direct this entropy to specific functions or specific action. And here we designed it in such a way that we direct it into the self-healing. So we just drill a hole, give a little bit of energy, and then all this entropy is pumped into the self-healing. So this hole closes away, and I mean, it's very difficult to calculate the properties of these materials, or the unstable networks. Neural network is realistically our only hope how to describe it. And I think I will just give you really mention a few examples that we have other materials based on similar principles. So we create artificial membranes with the selective ionic channels, which is important for various biological experiments, like artificial neurons, for example. So and it works exactly on the same principles as the ionic channels in the real cells, and we can actually do the COVID-19 antiviral proteins exactly based on this principle. So it senses the presence of the virus and then releases proteins to destroy the membrane of the virus. Here is another, just last example. So it's a really live material. I really like this story. So you take bacteria which emit electron during its life cycle, and you combine it with the conductive polymer. So this electron can be collected by the conductive polymer, send it into the circuit. So you basically get a live fuel cell. The beauty here is that you build this conductive polymer in situ. You start with monomers, and those electrons help building those monomers into polymer, and the polymer help the bacteria to multiply. So it's a live material which develops and grows by itself. So you basically grow your fuel cells. So I think I will probably stop here. So just to say that this is only one of the possible visions for the future of the material science. And I should say, so again, congratulations, and it's really huge pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.